She didn't know he was watching. That was the whole point. Maya Rose was a Black woman, 25 years old, a mother of 3, working the closing shift at one of Manhattan's most exclusive fine dining restaurants. She had wet shoes, an apron folded under her arm, and a wallet she'd found on the floor of table 12. A leather wallet with a platinum card inside and a handwritten address 8 miles north in the middle of a November snowstorm. The man who'd left it was Seo Jin Woo, chairman of a billion-dollar private conglomerate known in certain circles by the name Snow Wolf, with a white tiger tattooed on the side of his neck and eyes that took in everything and gave back almost nothing. Her manager told her to mail it. It wasn't their problem. The restaurant was closed and the trains were running wrong, and she was already 9 hours into a day that had started at 5:30 in the morning with 3 kids and not enough sleep. She put on her coat and walked 8 miles, in the snow, in the dark, in shoes that weren't built for either. Nobody asked her to. Nobody was watching, or so she thought. And what Maya Rose did when she believed nobody was watching is exactly the thing that changed everything. Because he was watching. He had been watching all along. And what she did next, what she chose in the cold, alone, when doing the right thing, cost her something real, is the reason this story exists. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The alarm went off at 5:31. Maya silenced it before it finished the first cycle. She lay still for 3 seconds, not sleeping, just doing the inventory. Ezra's breathing through the wall even. Lena's room, quiet. The creak of the radiator that meant the building's heat was cycling, which meant at least it was running tonight. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood up before she could think about not standing up, which was the only reliable method she'd found. The apartment at this hour was entirely hers, not joyfully, not romantically, just factually, the way a 12-minute window belongs to whoever is awake in it. She moved through the dark from habit, knowing exactly which floorboard to skip between the bedroom and the bathroom, knowing how long to run the cold water before the pressure dropped, knowing the second shelf of the medicine cabinet by touch. Caleb's inhaler, Lena's allergy syrup, children's Tylenol she hoped she wouldn't need this week, and the pregnancy test she'd bought 3 weeks ago when her cycle was late, and then put up there because she couldn't throw it away and couldn't look at it either. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, pulled her straight blonde hair into its ponytail with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had performed the motion approximately 1,200 times. She looked at herself in the mirror above the sink, honey skin, dark amber eyes, the faint shadow under each that concealer helped with until the 4th hour of any shift. She pressed 2 fingers under the left eye. She blinked. She was fine. The coffee was ready at 5:43. She drank the first cup standing at the kitchen counter because sitting felt like a commitment the morning hadn't earned yet. Through the window above the sink, the building across the alley, a yellow square of light on the 3rd floor, where someone else was also awake at this hour, doing whatever it was that had interrupted their sleep. She lifted the cup. She didn't think about anything in particular. At 5:58, Ezra woke up. May. Not quite a cry, that particular sound he made between sleep and demand, the word he'd given her when he was trying to say something harder and found his own version instead. She was already moving by the time he finished saying it. He stood in his crib with both hands on the rail and Peanut on the floor. Because the elephant fell every night and every morning, Ezra registered this as a fresh injustice. Maya picked up Peanut. Ezra grabbed the elephant and grabbed her neck at the same time. Because At 3 years old, there was no logical reason to choose between them. She changed him, dressed him in the blue fleece pants and the long-sleeve shirt with the trucks on it. She settled him in his chair with a cup of warm milk and turned on the small television to the Nature Channel, low volume, just enough noise to hold him while she got the other two moving. Lena appeared in the kitchen doorway at 6:12, one sock on, the purple notebook under her arm, her honey blonde curls in the specific chaos that resulted from sleeping on wet braids. She was wearing the shirt from 2 days ago. "That shirt is in the laundry pile," Maya said. "I got it out," Lena said. "It needs to be washed. It smells fine." Lena pressed her nose to her shoulder and inhaled. "It smells like outside." "Change it. Can I have cereal first?" "Change, then cereal." Lena went to change, narrating every step of the injustice through the wall. She came back in the shirt Maya had set out the night before, which was also acceptable to her, as long as she'd been the one to discover it was acceptable. Maya had learned this 6 months ago. She no longer laid out clothes and announced she'd laid them out. She laid them out and left them where Lena could find them. Caleb came out at 6:20. 7 years old, dressed, backpack already on. He set the field trip authorization form on the counter beside the coffee maker. He'd asked about it 2 nights ago. Maya had said she needed to sign it, and now here it was, placed precisely where she'd need it. Accompanied by a plain white envelope, marked trip money in his handwriting. Maya looked at the envelope. "I had $7 in my savings," Caleb said. "The trip is 12. She was quiet for a moment. "I have the rest," she said. "I know," he said. "I just had it." She signed the form. She folded her $5 in with his 7 and put the envelope in the front pocket of the dinosaur backpack. She did not say what she thought, which was that she had a 7-year-old who had checked the amount in his savings account so he could contribute to his own field trip, so she wouldn't have to pull from the tip's envelope. She just put the money in the pocket and zipped it. She made eggs. She made toast. She packed 3 different lunches in 3 different bags because Caleb wouldn't eat the crackers Lena liked, and Lena refused anything that had touched a banana. And Ezra's dietary preferences changed daily in ways that could not be predicted from previous data. She added apple slices to all 3 because apples were neutral territory. At 8:12, Diane let herself in with her key. Maya's mother walked into the apartment carrying a grocery bag on one arm and a casserole dish under the other, set both on the counter, lifted Ezra from his chair to her hip without pausing, and kissed the top of his head. She was 60 years old with natural gray-streaked hair pinned in a neat bun, reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck, and the particular quality of presence that fills a room without demanding it. She had been managing difficult situations since before Maya was born, and she managed them now the way she managed everything, directly, without performance. "You look tired," she said. "You say that every day," Maya said. "Every day it's true." Diane looked in the casserole dish. "I made the jerk chicken thing. It's in the oven at 250. You didn't have to. How late tonight?" Maya zipped Ezra's lunch bag. "Midnight. Should be home by midnight." Diane said nothing. They both knew what should be was worth in the vocabulary of restaurant work. She bounced Ezra on her hip and turned toward the living room. Maya walked the kids to school, 2 blocks east, 1 block north. Caleb walked beside her, and slightly ahead, with the particular gait of a child who had decided he was old enough for the sidewalk to be his but still unconsciously calibrated his pace to hers. Lena held her left hand, and with her right hand, she pressed the loose tooth back and forth with her tongue while describing, in detail, a dream she'd had about a horse that could also be a backpack. At the door of PS 163, Maya did the sequence she'd been doing every morning for 2 years. She kissed Lena twice because Lena required twice. She kissed Ezra where Diane held him on the sidewalk, in the roundness of each cheek. She put her hand on Caleb's shoulder, and he leaned into it for exactly 2 seconds. And then he picked up his pace and went through the door, and she watched the back of his dinosaur backpack until it disappeared. She stood there for a moment after the door closed. Then she turned around. She worked the afternoon prep shift at Elara, 4 hours of the invisible work that made a fine dining restaurant run, folding napkins, resetting tables, going over the evening specials with Victor during the 45-minute pre-service meeting that he ran standing up because he found no reason to sit during anything that could be accomplished in motion. Halibut is the feature, Victor said. The burgundy is the pairing. We moved away from the Chablis. It's too mineral with tonight's preparation. Walk table 9 away from the tasting menu if they're sharing. The portions aren't built for it, and it ends with someone complaining. And Rose. He looked at her. Single reservation at 10 Fort 5. Walk in. I know who it is. Table 12. Take care of it. She didn't ask who. Victor's tone did not invite questions. At 3, she left to get the kids. Caleb was waiting at the door. Lena came out 14 seconds later with a drawing that depicted their family as dolphins, which she explained was because dolphins live together forever. Ezra came home with Diane, already fed his afternoon snack, with a sticker on his forehead that he didn't know was there. Back at the apartment. Homework, juice, Lena's ongoing research project of the loose tooth, Ezra deciding that the casserole was acceptable if he ate it only from the blue bowl with the chip on the rim. Maya changed into her work uniform in the bathroom, with the door locked for the 4-minute duration it took, which was the only privacy she had that wasn't 5 a.m. She kissed each child in reverse order of age. Ezra first, then Lena, then Caleb, who received the kiss on the top of his head and accepted it with the particular stoicism of a 7-year-old who still needed it but was not going to make a ceremony of it. Be good for Grandma, she said. We're always good, Lena said, with the tooth still wobbling. Caleb caught her eye over Lena's head. Something passed between them that didn't need words. She almost smiled. She left at 5. The dinner service moved the way good services moved. Without visible effort, which meant with enormous invisible effort from everyone involved. Maya worked 4 tables in the back half of the room, memorizing the burgundy pairing, steering table 9 away from the tasting studio, without letting them feel steered, catching the one woman at table 3 who wanted to order for her partner and redirecting the moment before it became an incident. She moved through the dining room the way she moved through the apartment in the dark, by knowledge, not by looking. By 10:30, the room was down to 2 tables. The last couple at table 8 was finishing dessert, and neither was in a hurry, which meant they'd be there until 11. The business dinner at table 5 had been ready for the check since 10:15, but the senior man kept ordering more wine, which meant they were there until the wine ran out. At 10:47, the door opened. Maya was at the kitchen pass, reviewing the dessert tickets. She felt the door before she heard it. The particular displacement of air that came with a cold street entrance in November. She looked up. He came in alone. No companion, no briefcase, no phone visible. He stood in the entrance in a black overcoat over a midnight navy suit, top button of his shirt undone, and did something she almost never saw people do at restaurant entrances. He looked at the room before he chose where to go, not at the hostess stand, not at the tables. The whole room, the way you look at a space when you need to understand it before you commit to being in it. And then his eyes moved to her. She was standing at the pass with 2 dessert tickets in her hand, still in her server's uniform, hair in its ponytail, apron tied. She held the look. She didn't look away, and she didn't look down, and she didn't smile the professional smile. She just held it, because for some reason she couldn't fully explain, she didn't perform for this particular moment. Victor appeared at her elbow without making a sound. "Table 12, he said. Quiet, direct, whatever he wants. That was the phrase Victor used for one kind of guest. She walked to 12. "Just you tonight?" she asked. "Just me." His voice was even, unaccented, unhurried. He looked at the chair facing the door and chose it. "I've never been here before. Can I get you started with something while you look at?" "Your recommendation," he said. "I don't need a menu." She told him about the halibut, the exact preparation, the way the kitchen had built the sauce tonight, the reason the burgundy worked better than the chablis with this particular dish. She spoke the way she always spoke about food, which was as if it deserved the explanation. She had learned early that guests who asked for recommendations wanted to hear care in the voice, not just information. She gave him both. He listened without interrupting. His hands were resting on the table. He wasn't performing attentiveness. He was simply attending. "That," he said when she finished. "And a still water." She brought the bread and the water. When she poured, she became aware that his gaze was on her face rather than the pour, which was something she felt rather than confirmed. She didn't confirm it. She set the bottle down and left the table. At the kitchen pass, she stood still for 10 seconds before she moved. The meal took 40 minutes. He ate without his phone, without any material that suggested he was using the dinner as work. He sat with the particular quality of stillness that came either from peace or from discipline. And in her experience, the two looked identical from the outside. Twice she came to check the table and found him watching the room. Once she came and found him watching the kitchen pass with an expression that was simply interested, as if the way a professional kitchen worked was something he found worth observing. One time she came to refill the water, and he waited until she looked up to ask her something. "How long have you been here?" "At Alara, 3 years. He nodded once. "You recite the menu differently than the others." She didn't answer that. It wasn't quite a question. He finished the halibut. He set his napkin beside the plate in the way of someone who had been taught the gesture and performed it automatically, not performatively. He laid cash on the table. She had the number peripherally, more than the bill, by an amount that registered as deliberate rather than careless, and stood. He buttoned the coat. He looked at her name tag, which read M. Rose. "Thank you, Maya," he said. "Maya, not M, not Rose, her full name." She watched him walk to the door. She watched the door close against the cold outside and the glass tremble once in the frame from the wind. She turned back to table 12 to clear it. She lifted the napkin. She moved the water glass to the tray. She was reaching for the bread basket when she saw it, pressed against the baseboard below the chair leg, half in shadow, dark leather against the dark floor. A wallet. She crouched down and picked it up, thick. Premium leather, unmarked, no logo. She opened it. A platinum card without a bank name on it. $200 in cash, 50s, and a piece of plain white paper, folded once, thick stock. She unfolded it. An address, written in blue ink. The handwriting was firm and specific. Not rushed, not printed. Written by someone who took care with letters. 14th floor of an address on East 96th. Below the address, in smaller letters, CO Group, 8 miles north. Victor's voice came from behind her. "Mail it in the morning. Not our problem." Maya looked at the paper, looked at the door, looked at the window where the snow that had started as a suggestion an hour ago was now pressing against the glass with some intent. She folded the paper back into the wallet. She put the wallet in her coat pocket. "Rose," Victor said. "I'll be in tomorrow at 3, she said. She untied her apron, folded it, and picked up her bag from the coat rack by the kitchen door. She put on her coat. She pushed through the front door of Alara and stepped out into the cold. The cold was different from what she'd expected. It had gotten worse while she was inside. She stood for a moment on the sidewalk outside Alara, with her coat buttoned, and her scarf in her pocket, and the wallet pressed against her ribs through the fabric. The snow was real snow now, the purposeful kind, not the ornamental flurries of early November, but the late-month version that meant something about the night, about the city, about what it would cost to stand still in it. She checked her phone. 11:14. The last uptown train ran in 26 minutes, but not going north, going crosstown, which was the wrong direction and would require 2 more trains and add 40 minutes on a good night. She checked her account balance. After the rent transfer that would hit Thursday, a car service was a $20 decision she couldn't make casually. She put the phone away. 8 miles. She'd walked 8 miles before. Not at midnight, not in restaurant shoes, not after 7 hours of service. But the fact of the distance alone wasn't the obstacle. She knew what the obstacle was. The obstacle was that Victor was right. It wasn't her problem. The man had a platinum card. He had resources. He had Victor's immediate recognition. People like that had ways of recovering lost objects that didn't require a woman in a server's uniform walking through a Tuesday night snowstorm. She pulled out the paper and looked at the address again. The handwriting was not careless. It was the handwriting of someone who had decided what they were going to write before they wrote it. Someone who believed that how you rendered a letter said something about your relationship to the person reading it. It was not the handwriting of a man who had scribbled an address in a hurry. She folded the paper back. She put it in the wallet. She put the wallet in the inside pocket, the one with the zipper. She started walking. The first 6 blocks were the honest part. She was cold, but not badly cold, moving fast enough to generate warmth, still close enough to Alara that she could turn around and not feel the weight of the distance behind her. She passed the bodega on 76th, the pharmacy on 78th that had a closed sign in the window even though the lights were on, a laundromat with 2 people folding at this hour because the machines were free after midnight. She nodded at them through the glass. Neither looked up. By 81st Street, the snow was in the collar of her coat. She pulled her scarf from her pocket and wrapped it over her head and chin. She tucked her hands into her pockets. The wallet was in the inside pocket, and she could feel it against her ribcage through the coat layers. A specific shape, a specific weight, a reminder of why she was here. At 83rd, she passed a man walking a dog, and the man looked at her the way people looked at a woman alone at midnight. That quick assessment that went, is she in trouble? Does she need something, or is she just walking? She gave him the look she'd developed over years of closing shifts. I'm fine. I know where I'm going. Thank you for the concern. He nodded. The dog stopped to smell something. They went their separate ways. By 85th Street, her feet were wet. The restaurant shoes were excellent on slick tile. They were not built for snow accumulation on concrete. The moisture came through the seams first, then through the soles, and now each step had that specific cold weight of wet shoes in cold air. She kept her pace. She had learned a long time ago that the way to handle a physical discomfort you couldn't remove was to incorporate it. Make it part of the rhythm rather than a reason to stop. She thought about calling Diane. She thought about the conversation that would follow. Diane saying, "Come home. The wallet will find its owner. No errand is worth catching pneumonia." All of which was true, and none of which felt like the right answer tonight. She didn't call. She thought about the way he'd said her name. Not M. Rose. Not Hey or Miss or another Table 12 casualty of fine dining anonymity Maya. Her full name, spoken with the same deliberateness as the handwriting on the address. At 86th Street, the light was red. She stopped. She looked north. 2 more blocks to the address. She looked around. The street was nearly empty. Just headlights at the far end, a taxi making a turn, and a black car parked against the curb with its engine running. She registered the car the way she registered everything, first as a detail, then as a fact. Mercedes. Long, black. Not flagged for a pickup, not double parked the way a delivery would be, just parked, idling alone on the block. The windows were up. The exhaust made white in the cold air. The light changed. She stepped off the curb and crossed the street, and she was 2/3 of the way across when the driver's window came down. The man behind the wheel was Seo Jin-woo. Not in the back seat, not in the passenger side. He was behind the wheel, alone in his coat, with the collar turned up. His face when she saw it was exactly as it had been in the restaurant. Attentive, still directed at her with the same particular quality of focus that had made her hold his look instead of looking away. He had been there for a while. That was her first thought. Long enough to turn up his collar against the cold coming through the window. Long enough for the engine to have been running. Long enough to be here and not at his building, which was still 2 blocks ahead. She stopped in the middle of the crosswalk. The light behind her had already changed back to red. He looked at her. She looked at him. The snow fell between them in the headlights. Her hand found the wallet in her inside pocket. Her feet were wet, and the wind was doing something to the back of her neck that she'd been ignoring for 11 blocks. She was standing in the middle of an intersection in a snowstorm at 20 past midnight, and she had been walking for 43 minutes, which she knew because she'd checked her phone at 71st Street and again at 80th, calculating the pace the way she calculated table turns during a full service. She thought about what she'd been thinking about during those 43 minutes because it wasn't nothing. It had been something that had built slowly, the way the snow had built, starting as almost nothing and arriving at real. She had been thinking about Derek. She always tried not to, which was why she always ended up doing it. Derek Hayes, who had sat across from her in the kitchen of the apartment they'd shared, and used the language of growth and self-knowledge to describe what was, in fact, leaving, who had said, "I'm not in a place to give what you need," while looking at Ezra, who was 6 months old, and could not yet sit up unassisted, who had said it was not about her, which she had understood immediately to mean it was entirely about her, about the fact that she was a person with children, and with weight, and with needs. And he had discovered that he'd prefer a version of himself that didn't have those things nearby. He had not been cruel about it. That was almost the worst part. Cruelty would have given her something to push against. He had been reasonable and articulate, and she had stood in the kitchen of the apartment. She still had the apartment. She'd figured out how to keep the apartment, and watched him explain his exit, using sentences that sounded like therapy and made sense individually and added up to abandonment. She had not cried. She had waited until he was gone, and then she'd stood at the kitchen for 20 minutes without moving, doing nothing, until Ezra's first real waking cry of the night came through the monitor and she went to him. And that was the end of standing still. She had not cried since she thought about Caleb. About the backpack he started packing the night before in October. The week after, she'd said on the phone to her mother, "I just need mornings to be less hard." She had not known he was awake. She had not known he could hear her through the wall. And he had never said a word about it. Had just started doing it, quietly, consistently, in the particular way that 7-year-olds perform love when they understand it but can't name it. She thought about Lena, who drew pictures of the family as dolphins and horses and other things that stayed together by nature, who had asked once, just once, why Daddy didn't come on weekends anymore, and when Maya had given her the careful answer, the one she'd rehearsed, the one that was true without being too much, Lena had nodded very seriously and then said, "But we're okay." "Right, Mommy, we're okay." And Maya had said yes, and Lena had seemed satisfied with that and moved on. And Maya had held that moment in her chest for weeks afterward like something fragile. She thought about Ezra, who was 3 and who didn't understand the shape of what was missing yet, who only knew that Maymay left and Maymay came back and the leaving was bad and the coming back was good, who cried at the door every evening not because he was afraid she wouldn't return, but because the leaving itself was the part he hadn't made peace with. Who would eventually make peace with it? Who she was determined would make peace with it because she was going to keep coming back every time, without exception, which was the only promise she could actually keep. She was thinking about all of this at 83rd Street, at 85th, walking through snow in shoes that were not meant for this. Having made a decision that Victor called not her problem and that she had made anyway, not because she was naive and not because she was obligated, but because somewhere in the years since Derek left and the tips envelope got thinner and the kids started doing quiet things to help without being asked, she had arrived at a simple understanding. She was the person who did this. She had always been this person. It was the only version of herself she could live inside without cost. And nobody was going to take that from her. Not exhaustion. Not an empty savings account. Not the man who had left, and the man before him who had also left, and the general cumulative evidence that the people she trusted with her weight had a tendency to decide it was heavier than they'd expected. She was still this person. She was going to stay this person. And on the specific night in question, this person was going to return a wallet to its owner, even if it took 8 miles and wet shoes and a storm. She wiped the snow from her eyelashes with the back of her hand. She was thinking about all of this at 86th Street when the light changed, and she stepped off the curb, and she was 2/3 of the way across the intersection when the car window came down and she recognized the face behind it. She stopped. The snow kept going. The exhaust kept making its white cloud against the black air, and Seo Jin-woo looked at her from the driver's seat of a car that had been parked on this street for longer than it would take to pull over and check a phone. He had been here, waiting. He'd been here the whole time. Her hand found the wallet in the inside pocket. She looked at the car. She looked at him. She felt the whole 43 minutes behind her and the 2 blocks ahead of her that she was now not going to need to walk. And in the space between those 2 things, something clicked into place. The address written by hand, not printed. The wallet left under the chair where nobody else had been sitting, the cash still in it. The card, the money, left precisely so there would be something worth returning. The car parked not at the address, not at the door, but 2 blocks away, at a distance that allowed him to watch her arrive. He hadn't forgotten the wallet. He had left it for her, deliberately, to see if she would come. She walked to the car. She did not know what she was going to say. She was wet and cold and had been on her feet for 9 hours, and she had just walked 43 minutes in a snowstorm for a man who had apparently decided to make it a test. And she should have had something sharp prepared, something that communicated exactly what she thought of the kind of person who engineered situations in which other people walked 8 miles in November weather. What she had was the wallet. She stopped at the driver's window. She held it up. He said, "I was going to come back for it." A pause, not empty, the kind of pause that means someone is deciding how honest to be. "But I wanted to see what you'd do," he said. She stood there with the wallet in her extended hand and looked at him, at his face, the sharp angle of the jaw, the dark eyes that had been watching her all night, the white tiger tattoo high on the right side of his neck, visible above the turned-up collar. He was looking back at her with the expression of a man who had expected several possible responses and was not sure yet which one was coming. She understood the whole architecture of it now, the handwritten address that was personal, not business. The specific placement of the wallet under his chair where she would find it, and not a busboy. The card left in, so there would be a reason to return it. The car positioned exactly where she could see it, at the end of the walk. At the moment, she would have been tired enough to receive something. The absurdity of it was complete and perfectly constructed. Maya Rose laughed. Not the restaurant laugh. Not the managed, professional acknowledgement she deployed when a guest made a joke she'd heard 6 times already this week. The real one. The one that came from somewhere she didn't usually leave open at this hour, with wet feet in the snow. The full sound of it surprised even her. Genuine, a little breathless. The kind that came when something was too ridiculous and too true at the same time to handle any other way. "You are completely out of your mind," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, quieter than that, more like the recognition of a smile, as if he'd found the correct answer to a question he'd been sitting with. He reached across and opened the passenger door. She looked at the door, she looked at him. She counted the reasons why getting in was not the rational choice. And then she looked at the way Victor had said his name without saying his name. The way Alara's dining room had registered his presence without acknowledging it. The way people with resources and intentions did not leave handwritten addresses in wallets for women they meant harm. She got in. The heat hit her immediately. She hadn't known how cold she was until she had something to compare it to, which was how cold worked, which was how a lot of things worked. She sat with the wallet in her lap and her hands folded over it and looked straight ahead at the snowflakes, hitting the windshield, which the wipers cleared in slow arcs. Her feet were wet and warm at the same time, which was an unpleasant combination she'd sort out later. She heard him watching her without looking. She let him. "You walked the whole way," he said. "I didn't have a car." "You could have called a car." "I could have mailed it and not come at all," she said. "I didn't either." A pause. He looked at her once, then back through the windshield. He started the engine. "Where do you live?" 110th, she said. He pulled into traffic. The streets at this hour were the city's skeleton. Stripped of the daytime crowd, the scaffolding showing. The snow had thinned to something intermittent. The storm deciding whether it was finished or just catching its breath. They drove north on streets that were mostly empty, past shuttered storefronts and the amber smear of streetlights on wet asphalt. The car was quiet, a good kind of quiet. Not awkward, not weighted. The kind where 2 people are in the same room and neither needs to fill it. He broke it. "Why did you come?" he asked. He was looking at the road. Maya thought about the 43 minutes, about Caleb's backpack and Derek's reasonable sentences and the particular price of doing the right thing when nobody is watching and nobody will ever know. "Because it was the right thing," she said. "You didn't know me. I knew you were a person." He was quiet for a moment. The traffic light ahead turned red. He stopped the car. "You know who I am now," he said. She looked at him. The red light put a particular quality of shadow on the side of his face. The tiger tattoo, the jaw, the eyes that were always watching something. "I know that Victor knows who you are," she said. "I know the suit and the watch and the way Alara behaved when you walked in. That's what I know." "That's not everything," he said. "It's enough," she said. "For tonight." The light changed. He drove. The silence settled again differently this time. After a moment, he said, "Your bag," when you opened it at the door. 3 photos in the front pocket. She'd forgotten. She always forgot they were visible. 3 photos clipped together with a binder clip. Caleb's school portrait from September, serious and posed and exactly himself. Lena's from last year, missing the first tooth, grinning with the gap in the center. Ezra in the laundry basket with Peanut clutched to his chest, beside himself with some private joy. 3 kids, he said. How old? 7, 5, and 3. Names? People asked if she had kids. People said, that must be a lot, or how do you manage, or bless your heart, all of which she had learned to receive and deflect in the same 2 seconds. Nobody asked names. Caleb, she said. Lena, Ezra. He repeated them quietly, placing them, not performing. Caleb's the oldest, he said, not a question. 7. He started packing his own backpack in October. She paused. She hadn't planned to say the next part. I mentioned once to my mother that mornings were hard. He heard me through the wall. He's been packing it the night before ever since, without telling me why. She stopped. Sorry, you didn't ask for that. I was going to, he said. She looked at his profile. He meant it. Lena is 5, she said. She's been losing a front tooth for 3 weeks. It's partially detached, and she's working on it like a research project. She carries a purple notebook where she draws stories she invents. She thinks dolphins live in families forever, which is biologically inaccurate, but not the hill I'm dying on. He made a sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh, not at Lena, at the specific accuracy of the observation. Ezra is 3, she continued. He calls me Maymay, which was his word for mommy, and which I have not corrected and will not correct. He has a stuffed elephant named Peanut, who falls off the bed every night at approximately 3 a.m. He processes this as a new tragedy each morning. She looked out the window. He cries when I leave and runs when I come back, every time, like each leaving is permanent and each return is a surprise. She was quiet after that. Jinwoo drove north. At 110th, he turned and found her building by the number she'd said, without asking again. He pulled up to the curb in front of the entrance. The glass door with the code panel, the lobby visible through it, with the tile floor she'd swept herself when the super was out in January. She looked at the wallet in her lap. She held it out to him. He took it. He opened it. He looked at the card, the cash, the folded paper. Then he removed the paper, just the paper, the one with the address in his handwriting, and held it out to her. Keep it, he said. She looked at it. Why? In case, he said. She took the paper. She folded it once and put it in the inside pocket of her coat. The one with the zipper. The one where she kept the things she wasn't ready to let go of accidentally. She felt the weight of it settle there. She opened the door. The cold hit her. Still cold, but less brutal now with the warmth of the car behind her. She stood on the sidewalk and looked back in. You could have just asked Victor for my number, she said. He would have given it to you. He looked at her from the driver's seat with the same quality of attention he'd had all night. Complete, unhurried, aimed at her specifically, and not at the idea of her. I could have, he said, but then I wouldn't know you. She stood there for 1 second with the door half closed, letting that settle. Then she closed it. She went inside. The lobby was empty. The elevator was slow. She rode it to the 4th floor and walked the hall to 4C and stood at the door with her key already in the lock, not turning it yet, just standing. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened it. Saturday at 7. There's a place you'd like. She looked at the message. She typed back, how do you know what I'd like? The reply came before she'd put the phone back. I've been watching. She stood in the hallway outside her door and thought about 43 minutes in a snowstorm and a handwritten address and a man who had parked 2 blocks away from his own building to see what she'd do. She thought about Caleb's backpack and Lena's dolphin drawings and Ezra, who ran when she came back. She thought about the inside pocket of her coat and the piece of paper with the address folded in it, the ink that had been deliberate. She typed Saturday at 7. She put the phone in her pocket. She turned the key. The apartment was warm and quiet. The television on low in the living room, where Diane had fallen asleep in the armchair, with Peanut on her lap. Ezra had apparently staged a rescue operation and failed. The kids' rooms were dark and still. Maya hung her coat carefully. She unzipped the inside pocket and took out the paper and set it on the kitchen counter where she'd see it in the morning. Then she turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. She was asleep before she thought about it again. But she was smiling when she did. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever done the right thing when no one was watching, and it cost you something real? Have you ever been so used to giving that you forgot what it felt like to be seen? And have you ever stood in the cold, alone, and chosen integrity, not because anyone asked you to, but simply because it's who you are? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, integrity, and unexpected love, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click Join to become a part of our community and help the channel.